Hey everybody, and welcome back to another live stream from Northeast Christian Apologetics. My name is Simon Williams, and tonight you are joining us for the Monday night book study. Just as a reminder, this happens every Monday night at 6 p.m. And what we do is we read a book, or at least I do, and I give you my thoughts on the book and provide you with some feedback, and the people who are here get to ask questions and interact with me with regard to this book study. We are still going through Tactics. We've been enjoying it so far. I've been getting positive feedback on the book. Tonight we are on chapter 17, and this chapter is called Inside Out. I hope that you guys like the thumbnail that I created for it. I thought it was fun. But yeah, it should be a good chapter tonight. And just as a reminder, Tactics is written by Greg Koukl, who has a ministry called Stand to Reason, and I highly recommend checking out that ministry, Stand to Reason. He also has a YouTube channel. Make sure you go subscribe over there and give him a listen and look at his stuff. I think that it's really important for you guys to have this book with you in your library. So please be sure to get it at where you can. I found it on Amazon as well as christianbooks.com. Just a reminder, these pictures are not often updated. And so the prices will vary, but the ratings are pretty stable. Also, this is YouTube. I want to get this information out to as many people as possible, and I think that this is a good way to do it. Having a book study and being able to engage with people. I plan to read other books in the future, and I even plan to read some non-Christian books and provide my feedback on it and stuff like that, So don't forget, and one way that you can help me in this endeavor to have these kinds of conversations to strengthen the kingdom of God, to help people out with various things, the information readily available. One thing that I want to mention is that I think there's a lot of benefits for doing this book study where we read through the book together. I have it up on the screen and everything like that, because some of the people in my classes that I host at the churches in my local area tell me that they have a difficult time reading the material because of dyslexia, or their eyesight just isn't there. So I think that this is really good for people like that. So if you would like to help me reach out to provide this information to people that struggle with dyslexia or just struggle reading in general, then please consider subscribing and hit a notification bell and things like that. That really helps me out, and things of that nature. So, and I'm going to remember to turn it off this time. So we're not going to get it popping up again when we come back to this book. I hope everybody's been having a great week. I've been having a good week. I haven't updated my my slideshow in the beginning correctly. I need to do that, but Apologetics 101 series at the church in New London, it has finally wrapped up. We have completed all 30 sessions, going through what is knowledge, what is truth, how do we acquire truth, the arguments for the existence of God, and arguments against the truth of Christianity, and addressed all those topics. And the members that went there have really enjoyed it. If you are in Connecticut and would like to have something similar happen at your church, and reach out to me, don't hesitate to let me know if you would like that, or if you know anybody in Connecticut who would like that kind of stuff. That's what I want to do. Mighty Venus says, hello. How's it going? But we are all wrapped up at the church. Very grateful that they allowed me to do that there. It was definitely a blessing for me to be able to provide that to the kingdom of God. I hope that you guys are studying yourself. Remember, last week we were talking about barriers to belief. Remember that when you are studying Christianity, you should definitely be looking into things that would prevent you from what's preventing you from having a deeper understanding of Christianity, what's preventing you from having a stronger faith in God. And that might be the problem of evil, that might be Old Testament atrocities, that might be the reliability of the New Testament. Right now, I'm going through a study group on our Discord server reading this book, Can We Trust the Gospels by Peter Williams. I personally like this book. I think it's a good book. I recommend that people read it. I had my brother read it and things like that. It is kind of intended to be a introduction to the material, but there is some... You should be somewhat familiar with it. So it's not quite as introductory as it could be, but it's still a really good book. I think it's very helpful. But tonight, we're going to be continuing to read Tactics, our book for tonight by Greg Koukl, chapter 17. Let's jump over to the reading page. Kapow. All right, so chapter 17, Inside Out. Greg Koukl starts off by saying, years back, I lectured to a capacity crowd at the University of California at Berkeley. I made the case against moral relativism simply by pointing out how every day of our lives we each encounter and ultimately violate genuine deep morality. This discovery, I noted to the audience, had explanatory power since it accounts for something else we all know, the personal feelings of guilt each of us experience. Then I asked the question I pose frequently to groups like that. Why do we all feel guilty? I added maybe guilt is just a cultural construction, but there's another possibility. Maybe we feel guilty because we are guilty. Is that an option in the running? You may think this a bold stroke, but there is no risk for me at all. I have asked this question many times of audiences, and no one has ever stopped me afterward and said I was wrong. No one ever told me they never experienced guilt. They knew better. More to the point, for this tactic, I knew better. Even though I had never met a single one of them before that night, there was something I knew to be true for each of them on the inside that they couldn't keep from revealing on the outside, and they knew it too. The inside-out tactic is not so much a specific maneuver as a frame of mind, an insight to help you maneuver confidently, even creatively sometimes in conversations. In a sense, you have inside information on others that they will eventually acknowledge, sometimes unwittingly, if you just pay attention. A perfect example came from one of atheism's most colorful apologists, Richard Dawkins. According to his naturalistic worldview, morality is just a relativistic trick of evolution to get our selfish genes into the next generation. Nothing more. No design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Yet, in another work, he railed against the God of the Old Testament as a vindictive, bloodthirsty, homophobic, racist, genocidal, sadomasochist, malevolent bully. A very famous passage. Koukl continues, do you see the problem? This is not Dawkins's naturalism speaking. Instead, it's his common sense moral realism doing the talking. His protest makes no sense in his minimalist molecules in motion world, but is perfectly consistent with the world that actually exists, God's world. Notice here that there is something true on the inside for Dawkins, something he knows that he cannot help but display on the outside in unguarded moments. When he's defending his philosophical turf, he tells the lie. When his guard is down, his humanity betrays him and tells the truth in spite of himself. Why does this happen? Now, remember, we talked about this when we were reading through On Guard, not just when Dr. Craig was presenting the moral argument for God's existence, but also when we were talking about is life without God livable? You know, what are the consequences if God doesn't exist? And so in order to get a better understanding of what Koukl is talking about here, I definitely recommend go checking that out. In your own book of On Guard, reading chapter 2, I believe it is, or you can just watch those read-throughs when we did it. So Koukl continues, mannishness. The inside-out tactic is based on an insight I learned from the late Francis Schaeffer that has helped me navigate more confidently in conversations with others about Christ. He called it the mannishness of man. Strange phrase, agreed, but a provocative notion nonetheless. Schaeffer's insight is tied to this question: what does it mean to be human? Here is one answer: the response of naturalism, the worldview currently governing science. According to pop science guy Bill Nye, we are just a speck on a speck orbiting a speck among other specks. We emerge from microbes and muck, Carl Sagan declared. We have ourselves in bottomless free fall, lost in a great darkness, and there is no one to send out a search party. All right. Are they right? Of course, in a world without, and they are right, of course, in a world without God. Humans are nothing but cogs in a celestial machine, a cosmic junk, the ultimate unplanned pregnancy, left to build our lonely lives in the unyielding foundation of universal despair. The atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell put it: nihilism, bleak nothingism. Dr. Craig also talks about this, in which he says that, and he gets a lot of flack for saying this, but he calls us a miscarriage of nature, But if atheism is true, then, I mean, like, how can you not say that is a apt description of the state of humanity? Like, we have no purpose, we have no meaning, we have no eternal longevity. We're just a blip on the radar. Nobody eventually, if atheism is true, we're going to be extinguished from reality, and our impact is going to be nothing. We're literally, there's no reason for us to be here whatsoever, and so what we have to do is pick ourselves up by the bootstraps and make our own meaning, purpose, and value, as if that is sufficient. But it's not. Not all of us are happy with just saying, well, I'm just going to have to deal with the fact that I'm here. Even people that do think that they can create their own value, often that they do think that they can create their own meaning, value, and purpose, often struggle with existential dread, the fear of death, and constantly just distract themselves with the work and the own purpose that they do provide themselves, or just distractions, especially distractions like video games or scrolling endlessly on TikTok or whatever. But Koukl continues, yet no one really believes this, not deep inside. Solomon said God has set eternity in our hearts, Ecclesiastes 3:11. There is a better answer, a more accurate answer to the question: what does it mean to be human? And we all know it. In Schaeffer's words, man is different from non-man. Human beings are special, unique, unlike anything else in the created realm, crowned with glory and honor, as David put it in Psalms 8:5. This is the mannishness of man. At the core of our beings lies a mark and imprint of God himself, not on us as if foreign and attached, but in us as a natural feature built in our natures. This mark is part of what makes us who we are, or what makes us what we are, who we are. We would not be humans without it, but only creatures. Because of this mark, we are not kin to apes. We are kin to the God who made us for himself. I do not want you to miss the significance of this simple statement. God created man in his own image, Genesis 1:27. The very first thing said about humans on the outset of God's story. It means that anyone reading these words, every person who has ever lived or died or hoped or dreamed anywhere on this planet at any time in history, bears something beautiful at their core, a beauty that can never be lost and cannot be taken from them. No, we are not gods, but we are like God in an important way. God's image God's image in us is what makes abortion a homicide and sexual slavery a travesty. It is the reason we are not free to treat each other like animals. It is why certain inalienable rights belong uniquely to us. It is also the basis of our friendship with God. We are like him, so we can be near him in an extraordinary, intimate way. So I personally think that we should highlight this paragraph. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. And if you do so in your own books, I encourage it. I find that to be very powerful. You know, there's a lot of debates about how rights are acquired, and some people think it's a social convention, or some people think that it's innate to us. But if it's innate to us, then it has to be some sort of basis for that innateness. And what Koukl here is describing, that it is innate to us because we're made in God's image. These features are innate to God, and so since we are beings that are created in God's image, and we bear those kinds of traits as well. We have dignity and honor. A lot of people are struggling with the notion of the superiority of humans over other creatures, but when you look around, it is undeniable that humans stand head and shoulders above any other creature on the planet. You know, no other creature holds conventions on how they can actually rescue other species. You know, like no other creature has the ability to create the structures that we do, write the books that we have made, to do the achievements that we have done. You know, like it is mind-boggling, the technology that we have. You know, our technology is extraordinary. So Mighty Venus says, I 100% agree with that paragraph. Yeah, it's a great paragraph, you know. We should not be downplaying the importance of humans and the fact that we have this innate honor and dignity in virtue of being human, you know, being made in God's image. All right, so Koukl continues, in a very real sense, then, you have never met an ordinary person because, a lot of people, I feel like I need to say this as well, you know, like that a lot of people will say that we're all just stardust, and a lot of people think that makes people unique, that the fact that we're stardust makes us unique, when in reality it doesn't at all. There's nothing unique about being stardust, because everything is that we have here is stardust. All heavier elements other than hydrogen and helium, and there's a lot of people nowadays saying that the early universe could have had oxygen as well, and heavier elements to form water in order to speed up the coalescing of hydrogen in order to create suns or stars and things of that nature. But nevertheless, the heavier elements passed to leading up to iron being star killer, and then the collapsing of stars, which create even heavier elements that we see in the world, the universe. Everything that we see is stardust. So there's nothing unique about being stardust, but there definitely is something unique about being created in God's image. All right, anyway, Koukl continues. Because of the mark of God within our souls, we are each extraordinary in a way that no disfigurement, physical or moral, can ever change. No circumstance can ever alter. No thief can ever steal. It is God's forever gift to humanity, his image on our being. Thus we are precious to him as nothing else is. Jesus said, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent? And yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But the very hairs on your head are all numbered. Do not fear. You are more valuable than many sparrows." Because we all live in God's world and are all made in God's image, there are things all people know that are embedded deep within their hearts, profound things about our world and about ourselves, even though we deny them or our worldviews disqualify them. That which is known about God, Paul wrote, is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. Romans 1:19, emphasis added. That which is already on the inside, put there by God himself, eventually shows itself on the outside, in actions, in language, and in convictions. Our mannishness cannot be suppressed. This knowledge can make a big difference in our conversations. Here is my tactical application of the mannishness of man. The profound truths we all know on the inside always eventually reveal themselves on the outside. All you need to do is listen. Sometimes the inside-out factor reveals itself in unusual ways. All right, so 2 deaths. In the waning days of summer 1997, two well-known and well-loved women died within days of each other, but the public reaction to each death was radically different. Mother Teresa passed away peacefully at 87. Her death is as quiet to her death a quiet conclusion to a noble life well lived. Princess Diana died in her prime at 36. Her death a tragic and untimely intrusion into a life still filled with promise. Why did so many react so differently to the same kind of event? A life ending, a human being dying. From one point of view, an atheistic materialistic one, no one dies before their time. Death is death and arrives when it arrives. There is no timeliness for anything since there is no timetable. No schedule, no plan of how things are supposed to be. Everything just is. In a godless universe where all meaning is of our own making, what could it possibly mean to say someone died in an untimely death? It means that people know better. It means that they know that life has ultimate purpose and deep significance that transcends private projects. In spite of their pontifications or to the contrary, their mannishness gives them away. And there are lots of things like this if you look for them. People endorse moral relativism for convenience, but they are mortified at the genuine evil that assails the world and struggle with a guilty consciences for their participation in it. They deny conscious design in the universe, but reflectively invoke the wonders of Mother Nature when overwhelmed by the magnificence of God's world. They deny Father, so they praise Mother. Understanding this inside-out pattern provides a powerful technique to get someone thinking. The truth that we let in first is not a dogmatic statement of the truth of the scriptures, Schaeffer wrote, but the truth of the external world and the truth of what man himself is. This is what shows him his need. The scriptures then show him the real nature of his lostness and the answer to it. One interesting thing that I've been thinking about lately about this father and mother, like God is seen as a father and Mother Nature, the earth is seen like a mother, is that it's very much like humans as well, like man and woman, where the creation of life, is formed out of the woman. But the woman can't do it by herself. She needs the husband to help her. And so it's interesting how in the Bible it says that God formed, creatures out of the dust of the earth, So it's interesting that we routinely call earth or nature Mother Nature. I've never heard anybody say Father Nature or anything like that. So it does definitely resonate with me when we have this deep-seated kind of view about how nature is a mother-ish kind of statement. But the thing is that mothers cannot by themselves create life. They need the father. The father is the one who provides who gives them the mother the power to create life. So really interesting. So keep that in mind when people come, mention Mother Nature and things of that nature. Like if there is life, then that mother needs a father. All right, so continuing, here's how Schaeffer's insight can be useful for us. Listen to the way people talk. Watch for when from their own mouths, their acknowledgement of reality intrudes on their philosophies, and then exploit that tension by asking a question. In a world without purpose, why is Princess Di's death a tragedy? If there is no ultimate universal morality, how can anything be really evil? Why try to talk someone out of a suicide? If there is no meaning to life, what's the point? Mother Teresa finished her course, and Princess Diana did not. This is the victory and the tragedy of those events in the waning days of summer 1997, but only because there is a divinely intended purpose, a noble end humans have been designed for that sin sadly cuts short. Here is another example of the inside truth finding its way to the outside. So, my father's world. Something has always confused me about Earth Day celebrations. They seem to be based on a contradiction. Earth Day is a feat enjoyed by naturalists on the Main, who celebrate nature as ultimate and man's unique moral responsibility to protect it. There, did you see it? Did you catch the contradiction? To see the misstep, you must see something else first. Worldviews come in packages. They are like puzzles, with particular pieces fitting together into a coherent whole. Foundational concerns either fit crisply or with other details or foreclose on them. In a naturalistic worldview, nature is all there is. Physical things in motion strictly governed by the deterministic laws of physics and chemistry. In this package, then, there is no place for moral obligations of any kind, because morality is based on free choices, not on physical determinism. Further, Darwinism is a strictly materialistic process that produces strictly material goods. No pattern of genetic mutation and natural selection can cause an immaterial moral obligation to pop into existence. Thus, no living thing can have an obligation to protect any other. The locusts take what they can and leave nothing for the hapless boll weevil. Nor should they. May the best bug, the fittest critter, win. That's the program. Nature's balance is maintained by the corporate tug of war for survival that all living things engage in on this view, but or not by one species acting responsibly toward another. There are no moral hierarchies in nature, since nature has no resources to build them. Thus, the notion that a specific animal, even a human one, has responsibility of stewardship over any other, not to mention Mother Nature's entire project, is foreign to naturalism and thus to Darwinism. There is nothing in an atheistic naturalistic world that makes sense of man's obligation towards nature. That's the contradiction. As I said, it confuses me, and it ought to trouble naturalists too, but it doesn't appear to. There is a reason for this, I think. To them, it just seems obvious, regardless of their underlying worldview, that humans are different in a qualitative way, making us responsible as stewards over the world entrusted to us. That's not the exact language they use, of course, but it's what the intuition driving Earth Day amounts to. And they are right about this intuition, but certainly not in virtue of naturalism. Naturalists can talk all they want of human obligations, human meaning and purpose, human value, human significance, even human rights, but it's all chaff in the wind given their foundational understanding of reality. Here is what the Earth Day crowd gets right. Man is different. Humans are special. People are responsible because they are not the same as anything else in nature. And we all know this, which is why the fact continues to stubbornly assert itself, even with people whose worldview package cannot justify it. That's because this world is not Mother's world, it's Father's world. Again, these are things we all know, it turns out. They reflect our deepest intuitions about ourselves and the world we live in. But why do humans have an obligation to the planet given naturalism? This is a question we must ask, and waving the wand of evolution is not an answer, as we've seen. Carl Sagan says, we are cousins of apes. That is Mother's assessment, of course. Father says different. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Genesis 1:27. Note one thing more. God said to mankind, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. This is the accurate insight of Earth Day. We are both masters and stewards, regents on earth, yet servants of the Most High God. Yeah, the stewardship model definitely makes better sense on Earth Day. You know, the humans being stewards of the earth that we inhabit, acting in accordance with the best interests of and acting as not, and when you are now in Christianity teaches that when you are in control of something, if you are a leader of something, then you behave as a student or a servant of the people that you lead or command or control. So it makes sense. Earth Day makes better sense given a Christian worldview. So definitely agree with that for sure. All right, so Koukl continues, broken. I want to tell you another thing everyone knows. Something has gone terribly wrong. We call it the problem of evil. It prompts us to ask, why is there so much badness in the world? There is a wrinkle in this concern, though. Another detail each of us also knows. The world is broken, true enough. But we are broken too, and our brokenness is a huge part of what is wrong with the world. The world is broken because we are broken. Though man has inherent dignity, he is also cruel. The evil is out there, as it were, but it is also in here, in us. Things do not start out that way, of course. At the very end of the very beginning, once God had set everything in its proper place, we find the summary of all he had done. God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. All was as it was supposed to be, just as God intended. Everything worked according to its purpose. Man and woman, one with each other and with the world, resting in their friendship with God. When our first parents chose to follow the deceiver rather than their sovereign, though, they broke fellowship with the Father. They broke communion with each other, and they broke harmony with the earth they'd been entrusted with. When Adam and Eve sinned, they broke the world. Man badness made the world go bad. And this is an interesting feature. Like this idea that we have broken harmony. We have broken the harmony with the earth we've been entrusted with. And this is actually made evident to me by watching a series Alone, where people are sent out into the wilderness to try to survive the longest. And routinely in those seasons, the people in there start talking about how man really is a visitor in the wilderness. Like we don't really belong there. Like, why don't we belong here? Like our ancestors were a part of the wilderness, weren't they? So why are we so separated from it? But when you look at the history of mankind, it does seem like humans have to separate themselves. We create communities. We form social groups, obviously. We create towns, cities, nations, and everything like that. We subdue the earth and make it suitable to us, and we thrive in those kinds of environments that we create out of the wilderness. And so there definitely does seem to be this alien aspect of humans. And some people are like, man, maybe humans don't even never belonged on Earth. Maybe we're like aliens and we were planted here by some other, space entity and things like that. These kinds of real observations get people making those kinds of hypotheses, But the Christian explanation, is that we, by our actions, by rejecting being proper stewards of this planet, by rejecting God, we have destroyed harmony not only with God, but with each other and with the earth. So it makes sense. And Dr. Groheis talks about this. What he calls it is deposed royalty. Humans exhibit this quality of being deposed royalty. So Christianity explains why we are so powerful in comparison to other creatures on this planet, but it also explains why we're so alien, why we're so cruel, why we are in the state that we're in. When you really read the Bible, it doesn't sugarcoat human nature. It gives you exactly it describes us as we are. And so that's why there's so much evil in the Bible, because it doesn't sugarcoat the fact that we are evil, sinful beings, that have rejected God and each other. We fail to exhibit what's called properly ordered love. That's something that we need to be working on, understanding what properly ordered love is and displaying it. All right, so Koukl continues, because our parents become broken, each of us is now broken like them, since they reproduce children just like themselves, and their children have done likewise, one broken generation cascading down into the next. Each of us is still beautiful, to be sure. God's image cannot be erased. However, it can be defaced and disfigured, sullied, and spoiled, and that is what happened. To say we are broken is accurate, but it is also easily misunderstood since it does not go far enough. We are not machines that are malfunctioning. We are not bodies that are ailing. We are subjects who revolted, rebels who are now morally corrupted. We are guilty, and for this we must answer. Again, each of us knows this deep down inside. It is the inside-out point I traded on in my Berkeley lecture. We are the others doing those evil deeds we object to. Deep inside us is a gnawing awareness of our own badness, producing a feeling we universally recognize, guilt. At some point or another, if we are honest with ourselves, we feel the painful reality of our brokenness. There is none righteous, not even one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become useless. There is none who does good. There is not even one. Romans chapter 3, 10 through 12. Humans are beautiful, yes, but humans are also broken. And in our moral wretchedness, we are also profoundly guilty. We are in debt, not to a standard, but not to a rule, not to a law, but to a person, to the one who we have offended with our disobedience. And this is not good news, since our guilt has severe consequences. Yeah, a big issue with this is, and it's not just disobedience. You know, it's not just disobedience. It's the failure of expressing properly ordered love. We haven't loved God or each other properly. You know, and this is the source of the issues with mankind. This failure of expressing properly ordered love, failing to understand what it is, failing to express it. You know, if everyone displayed properly ordered love, then the problems that we see in the world would be eliminated. All right, so justice, Koukl continues, justice or mercy. Each of us longs for justice. We speak of it often, especially when we have suffered injustice. That is the inside revealing itself to the outside again. Justice is not ultimately satisfied in this life, though. It is satisfied in the next. I want to stop here for a second. Let's give this a highlight. You know, like justice is not ultimately satisfied in this life; it's satisfied in the next. All right, so this is a big problem with when you're talking about like naturalistic theories of morality, especially naturalistic theories that deal with objective morality, like Eric Wellingberg, what's his name? Eric Wielenberg, I believe. He has a Platonic kind of moral relative or moral objective moral. It's like a godless moral normative moral Platonism, and he has these abstract objects of providing moral features of the world and also moral obligations. The biggest problem that I have with his theory and any theory that is a godless kind of moral theory is moral accountability. That's one of the biggest things is not only that, but moral motivation. There's actually a lot of problems with it. I've discussed it in other videos in the past, but basically, like, justice is not ultimately served on that view. You know, it's impossible to. We cannot possibly serve justice appropriately on that view because the justice is served by humans, and humans are woefully ill-equipped to provide adequate justice. And it's because we're not omniscient, and we lack power, and we also lack goodness. You know, so since we don't know the full context of the actions that have taken place, then we cannot deal justice appropriately. All we can do is deal justice which seems appropriate to us at the time in a limited way. And the worst and the most severe punishment that we can give someone is probably like torturing them for the rest of their life. But really, it's capital punishment, you know, ending their life. But in many of those instances, it doesn't seem to be enough in certain situations. But on a Christian worldview, when the state provides capital punishment as a punishment, they're saying that this crime is so heinous that we're no longer in a court that can apply justice appropriately. So we need to elevate him to the next court. Just like there's hierarchies of courts, even in our country. When a case seems heinous enough or significant enough, then it gets elevated to higher courts. And so when we give capital punishment, we're like, okay, we need to pass this on to God. God needs to judge this person, basically. All right, so Koukl continues, at the end of the Bible, we find a dark passage, Revelation 20. It tells of the final event of history as we know it, a great trial on a great plain where a great multitude of the accused, the guilty ones, stand before a judge. The books of death are opened, each of our moral lives laid bare for all mankind to see. The record in the books, the basis for a final reckoning, a last judgment. Before the judge stand all the beautiful, broken, guilty ones, each shut up under sin. Every mouth is also shut, every voice silenced, unable to utter any defensive appeal or excuse. The record in the book speaks for itself. Here is Sagan's bottomless free fall, mankind lost in a great darkness. He is right about that, since we are all guilty, and no judge owes a pardon. Atonement must be made. The debt must be paid. Justice must be perfect. There is something else, though. I did not leave the students at Berkeley in despair, abandoned under the weight of their own guilt. Culpability we all shoulder. Blame we all share. The answer to guilt is not denial, I told them. That's relativism. The answer to guilt is forgiveness, and this is where Jesus comes in. I have made that point many times to audiences, and every time I say those words, something moves inside me. Forgiveness, mercy, repair, restoration, rebirth, new life, hope. This is what each of our souls long for. Sagan is right when he says that we are lost, but he is wrong when he says that there is no one to send out a search party. Clearly, humans need rescuing. We cannot rescue ourselves. Help must come from the outside, from outside of us, from outside of Sagan's closed cosmos, from outside of this world. And the search party has arrived. The rescuer has come. When Jesus comes into the world, he says, sacrifice and offering you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me. The whole burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come to do your will, O God. Hebrews 10, 5-7. Because our souls bear God's image, we are wonderful. Because we have rebelled against the God who gave us our beauty, we are broken, guilty, and ultimately lost. The wages of sin is death. The word tells us, Romans 6:23. In the darkness, though, there is hope, because it then adds, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Jesus Christ our Lord. He is the one who calls to us, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. I will give you rest, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And this is so true. This is so true. And this is something that I experience the most when I pray. When I do my devotions and I'm reading the Bible and I sit in solitude with God and pray. I feel God's peace. I feel the restoration that Jesus has provided for me. I feel this reconciliation that I acknowledge my sins and I repent of those sins, and I see the value of Jesus's acts, which is a demonstration of God's forgiveness. This is powerful stuff, and it's existentially pertinent. This is something that is valuable. People do crazy things in order to feel kind of peace and relief from anxiety and things of that nature. They spend lots of money. They do lots of scrolling on the internet. They do qigong and meditation and yoga and things of that nature. And I've done meditation and yoga and qigong, and the peace provided. You got to do a lot of work to get a fraction of the peace that you receive just by spending a couple minutes on your knees in prayer before God. You got to do a lot of work to get a fraction of the peace that you get just by praying to God. I tell you. All right, so Koukl continues, our restless souls. Augustine of Hippo most famously described the restlessness of the human soul and suggested its only proper place of repose. You have made us for yourself, O Lord. He wrote in his Confessions, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. So true. I think it is safe to say that this restlessness, this sense of longing, this ineffable yearning to be filled, or maybe yearning to be fixed, is a universal human affliction, a malady that has nothing to do with our natural appetites, since satisfying them never sates the hunger of our hearts. This ache of the soul can be muted by other distractions, but it can never be entirely silenced. Two facts of the human condition lie at the heart of our inescapable sense of longing. One is that we are broken. We have already spoken on that. The second is it hasn't always been this way. There remains a remnant of former beauty the brokenness cannot efface. As to being broken, we all know this on the inside. We face our own failures every day. Further, we know there is a place from which we have fallen. What else does this craving and this hopelessness proclaim? Wrote Blaise Pascal, the French mathematician and religious philosopher. But there was once in man a true happiness, of which all that now remains is the empty print and trace. We know it is not enough for us simply to be. Something has gone missing that must be replaced. We feel a sweet pain, a primal memory deep in our souls reminding us of the way the world started, good, wonderful, whole, complete. We were made for something better, and we scrap and scrape to climb back up, to return to the heights. That struggle is central to just about every film we have ever seen and every story we have ever read. The triumph of the human spirit, they say, God's image forcing its way to the surface, to the outside. The exceptions, of course, are the dark, nihilistic yarns, the dystopian tales that tell the lie that we are nothing. Note the conflicting visions, the vision buried deep in our humanity and the contrary vision flowing from the atheistic, nothingism view. Atheism, of course, denies the guilt. It must. Without good, there is no bad. It also denies the beauty. Again, it must. If no God, no guided design, no biological accidents, physical parts stuck together without reason or purpose, cosmic junk. Man is nothing and life means nothing. Atheism leaves us once again with naught. No, our true longing is a hunger that atheism simply cannot satisfy, a thirst it cannot quench. Holly Ordway was an atheist who watched her soul suffer injury, corrupted by a belief that did not fit reality. My atheism was eating into my heart like acid. I could not have explained the source of my own rationality, nor of my conviction that there were such things as truth, beauty, and goodness. My worldview remained satisfying to me only insofar as I refrained from asking the really tough questions. Ordway was not drawn to God initially because of DNA, irreducible complexity, or the finely tuned constants of the universe. Rather, she first saw God in John Keats, John Donne, and Gerard Manley Hopkins. She was alerted to God by beauty. As an atheist, she had been feasting on despair for years, and she was starving. However, satisfied, I declared myself intellectually. Atheism was a terrible place to live, she realized. It was the winter of my soul. The thaw began when a newly minted college professor, Ordway, reread the canonical poets of English literature and for the first time realized that the soul-satisfying beauty of their verse flowed naturally and natively from their Christian view of the world, God's world. I sensed something deeper in the poems I was reading. I could feel power thrumming in the lines of the poems and the electricity of meaning drawing from some source beyond my reach. The world of Hopkins, Keats, and Donne was a world where transcendent beauty made sense, where longing and hunger could be satisfied, where rising up from the fall was possible, a world where there was hope. Inside her, something moved. My heart was hiding, stirring. Wish day come. A realistic hope, though, or empty wish. C.S. Lewis answers, if I find in myself a desire with which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. This other world was the one Ordway hungered for. This was the understanding that made sense to the actual world she lived in, but there was also a dark side to her discovery. The understanding of reality that made sense of beauty and meaning and hope also made sense of this world's brokenness, both unintelligible in Holly Ordway's atheism. The disturbing part of her was this: the brokenness that was real was also moral and personal. I considered myself a good person, she wrote, but in my heart I was afraid to be judged on the real self behind my outward image. She was guilty, and she knew it. French philosopher, I'll butcher this name, as I do with most names, Guillaume Bignon, found his naturalistic atheism and being challenged as he encountered Christ in the New Testament. Nevertheless, the cross confused him. Why did Jesus have to die? He asked over and over again as he worked through his historical accounts of Jesus' life. It made no sense to him. Then something unexpected happened. God reactivated my conscience, he told me. That was not a pleasant experience. I was physically crippled by guilt and not knowing what to do about it. And this is important to understand. Guilt can be crippling. When you start falling away from God and rejecting God, especially if you are a Christian and you are born again and you're living in pursuit of seeing God's face, then when you start falling back into sin, it causes spiritual damage. And this spiritual damage often manifests itself in a decline of mental health, and that can be through guilt. It can be through shame. It can be through a variety of different things, when you're in a state of declined mental health, it is very difficult to assess the state of your mental health. This is why it's so important for Christians to be locked into a church with other Christians, to be engaged with a group of fellow Christians to help us with our burdens. Paul says that Christians are to bear one another's burdens, and by doing that, you fulfill the law of Christ. And the law of Christ is to love as he loved, So, very important stuff that we're talking about here. And it's well, like I said, it is existentially pertinent. It is something that we all deal with, we all deal with as children of God. This wrestling with guilt, this wrestling with shame, anxiety. Anxiety is supposed to provoke us to draw close to God, to bring us to our knees in order to seek God to help us. So whenever you're feeling anxiety, that is a call to prayer. So make sure you're doing that. Reading your Bible, engaging with other Christians, worshiping, singing Christian songs. There's a lot of resources available to have Christian music playing in the background and things of that nature today. All right, so Koukl continues. Suddenly it dawned on him. That's why Jesus had to die, because of me. Because of my guilt. He immediately surrendered all his brokenness to the only one who could repair it, and giving all his guilt to the only one who could forgive. When he did, the feeling of guilt just evaporated, and that is what happens. When that's what happens. It's like a sense of evaporation. It just leaves. There you get a sense of the departure of the guilt and the shame and the anxiety and what's troubling you, and you get infused with God's peace. One other thing that I wanted to mention here. All right, so another thing that I feel is really important to say here is that Jesus' death, when you study, I encourage everyone to do this, study forgiveness. How does forgiveness actually occur? What is forgiveness? What forgiveness is, when you study it, is that the person who forgives needs to take on some sort of suffering. You need to suffer being wronged in order to forgive. And I've talked about this in other YouTube videos and also on my blog, on my website. But someone has to die in order for forgiveness to occur. But what is death? Why is that? What is death? In the Bible, death is nothing other than separation. It just is a form of separation. And when you sin against somebody, you are separating yourself from them, whether it be emotionally or spiritually or physically or things like that. There's a separation that occurs. And so when you forgive someone, you're taking on that kind of death, that punishment, that separation, that kind of stuff. And so that's why that's why Jesus had to die. And that's why Jesus has to, and this is also why God has to be triune. So there's a lot that's going on here, but, and I talk about this at length in other blogs, but that's why Jesus had to die. It's a direct representation of God's forgiveness. It's a demonstration that, yes, I have forgiven you, but forgiveness is not all but reconciliation is more than forgiveness. You can forgive somebody and still not be reconciled to them. What needs to happen is that there needs to be both forgiveness by the person who is wronged or sinned against, and the sinner needs to repent. Only by repenting and forgiving can true reconciliation take place. And this is all throughout the New Testament. Repentance, forgiveness, reconciliation. That is what God's goal is to be reconciled with us. And this is the demonstration of it. He's demonstrated this forgiveness. Okay. So there's a lot to this, and I really encourage you guys to study forgiveness. All right, so it just evaporated. So Koukl continues that atheism cannot do this. It cannot explain the beauty and the wonder of being human, and it has no answer to the human brokenness. It cannot provide the consolation of true forgiveness. Only God in Christ can solve the crisis in our hearts. That is the road home. Pascal again. This craving is what man tries in vain to fill with everything around him, though none can help. Since this infinite abyss can be filled only with an infinite and immutable object, in other words, by God himself. Yeah, Blaise Pascal was always upset about the fact that people were constantly distracting themselves. He's like, death is coming for you. Death is coming for you. And when it comes, you don't know what's going to happen on the other side. And if you don't know that hell doesn't wait for you, that it's impossible for hell to exist, and you should. This is why Pascal's wager comes up. That's why he's like, if you don't know what's happening after you die, then you should be investigating. You should be acting in certain ways, And so, you should not be just trying to distract yourselves from this existential dread. This existential dread is supposed to motivate you to look into these things. That's what it's for, not to encourage you to distract yourself from them, But he talks a lot about prudence. Well, he doesn't really talk a lot about prudence, but prudence is something that comes up in his writings a lot. All right, so Koukl continues, because our souls bear God's image, we are beautiful. Because we have rebelled against the God who gave us our beauty, we are fallen, guilty, lost. We cry out, here is our remedy, stated simply in a Christmas card I received from a friend. The birth of Christ invites us to believe that the cries of a broken world have actually been heard. A Savior was born. There are times when clever arguments evade you. That's when a simple declaration of the truth may be all that's needed. Come to me. It is an offer of meat to hunger and thirst, and drink to thirst. Touch the existential nerve, the deep, profound desire that throbs in every fallen human being made in the image of God. Listen carefully in your conversations. Listen for when a person's mannishness speaks, when they tell the truth, and they must eventually point it out. My question to the audience at Berkeley was a direct application of the inside out tactic. I addressed those students confidently, since I knew that even though a person can run from God, he cannot run from himself. So what we learned this chapter: the inside out tactic is not so much a specific maneuver as it is an insight into what it means to be human that helps us navigate in conversations. Man, Francis Schaeffer wrote, is different from non-man. We are not insignificant specks lost in a universe of specks, but are unique and marvelous creatures bearing God's imprint. This fact is a truth. It is a truth every human knows on the inside that informs other truths about that eventually reveal themselves on the outside in words, actions, or attitudes. Those truths include the deep awareness that humans have profound value and worth, that human beings were designed for a valuable purpose, that we are beautiful yet broken and guilty, and that our restless souls hunger for rescue. Our job is to listen for a person's mannishness. When a person's mannishness speaks, to pay attention to when his language or reactions tell the truth, even though his worldview tells the lie. Then gently, charitably, graciously ask him about it. All right, so we have conquered another chapter together. And you know what that means? That means that we get to celebrate. Woohoo! Celebration time. Good job, everybody. Thank you for coming with me on this ride. I think that chapter was really good. I appreciate this chapter. Thank you very much for coming out for chapter 17, Inside Out, where we talked about what really fuels people on the inside and how sometimes it can break its way on the outside. All right, next week is going to be chapter 18, Mini Tactics, and then we're going to be doing chapter 19, and then we're going to be done with tactics. And then we'll be moving on to our next book, So once again, I really appreciate you guys coming out and visiting me during this time together. I hope that you find it to be beneficial. Mighty Venus says, we made it. Yeah, I like that chapter. It's a great chapter, It's a good chapter. I think that there was a lot of really good stuff in there. It's also... it's relatable. I personally find it incredibly relatable. And I think that people who become more and more self-aware will find it very relatable. I think that awareness of your depravity, and when you finally are able to break away from the distractions of the world, whether it be video games or YouTube videos or Netflix or things of that nature, when you start to sit in the darkness by yourself, you become aware of this vacuum more clearly, and it calls for you. And in the void is God waiting for you to catch you. So we got to keep that in mind. And when we have these conversations, and keep it in mind when we are talking with people, and knowing that these people are just as human as we are. But we're not living in a world of NPCs, of non-playable characters. We're living in a world with people that are loved by God. And so we should be endeavoring to love them properly as agents of God, or as image bearers. They have the imago Dei, just like we do. All right, so I'll see you guys next week for chapter 18 of Tactics. Remember, Monday night, 6 p.m. Share the video and comment, leave comments. Let me tell me what you think of the chapter. All right, thank you, and God bless. See you next week. Hey, before you go, I hope you enjoyed today's enlightening discussion during our Christian Apologetics book study. It's always a blessing to come together to explore our faith and grow in our understanding. Your participation means the world to me, and I'm grateful for your continued support of Northeast Christian Apologetics. Remember, you can stay connected with me and access valuable resources by visiting my website at nechristianapologetics.com. There you'll find a wealth of articles, videos, and recommended reading material to deepen your knowledge of Christian apologetics. If you're as passionate as I am about equipping believers to defend their faith and engage in meaningful conversations, you can also support this ministry in various ways. One way to support this work is through patreon.com. By becoming a patron, you'll have access to exclusive content, early access to our discussions, and a chance to connect with like-minded individuals who share your passion for Christian apologetics. If Patreon is not your style, some people prefer to give me a one-time tip. And if you'd like to do that, then feel free to do so through Venmo or Cash App. But of course, there are many ways to support me. By praying for this ministry, sharing the content on social media, or simply spreading the word about what I do. Every bit of support goes a long way in helping me fulfill my mission. Once again, thank you for joining me today. Your presence and engagement enrich these discussions, and together, we're on a journey to strengthen our faith and share the good news with others. Stay tuned for more exciting book studies, thought-provoking discussions, and opportunities to grow your Christian apologetics journey. I look forward to seeing you again.